There was nothing but the sound of the waves. That was the only sound that kept me company, John, now just a withered shadow on this desolate isle of Patmos. The white-crested waves, relentless, crashed against the barren cliffs like the monotonous beat of a cosmic heart that had forgotten me. My calloused hands traced the cracks in the rock where I sat, day after day, my dim eyes fixed on the endless horizon. They thought exiling me here, to the edge of the Roman Empire, would extinguish the fire within me. They believed solitude would break my spirit, that the silence would drown out the word I had preached. They were wrong. For in this profound stillness, I heard more clearly than ever. In the darkness of my cave, I saw more brightly than any torchlight. They could take my body's freedom, but they could not chain the soul that had once rested its head upon the Saviour's chest. The memory of him was my food. His promise was my water. I had witnessed his crucifixion, run to the empty tomb, touched the wounds of his resurrection, and for proclaiming that great truth, I was cast out from the world of men, left to the dust and the tides. But tonight there was a difference. The familiar salt-laced wind suddenly ceased. The crashing waves did not fall silent, but seemed to be swallowed by a silence even greater. Even the wild beasts in their dens grew quiet. The entire island, the entire world, it seemed, was holding its breath. I looked up, not because of a sound, but because of the lack of it. The night sky, usually a black velvet tapestry dotted with silver stars, suddenly became unnervedly deep. The stars no longer twinkled. They were like glass eyes, staring down, waiting. And then it came. It was not a bolt of lightning tearing through the night, nor the rolling thunder that shakes the earth. It was a light, but not a light that mortal eyes could define. It emanated from no single source. Space itself seemed to glow. It was a light that seemed to have sound, a melody so sublime, no earthly instrument could ever play it. It seeped into the cave, not dispelling the darkness, but making the darkness part of itself, a wondrous fusion. My whole body trembled, not from fear, but from an overwhelming awe. This feeling was more intense than when I stood on the Mount of Transfiguration, when I saw him converse with Moses and Elijah. A figure emerged from within the light. It was not Jesus. I knew him. This was another being, tall, majestic, with wings that seemed woven from starlight and dawn. The creature's face was both stern like a warrior's and gentle like a messenger's. Ancient power radiated from every movement. "John, beloved one," the angel's voice resonated, not through my ears, but directly into my soul. "You have been faithful to the end. You have longed to see the conclusion, the day when the Lamb is victorious. But to understand the end, you must witness the beginning." I was stunned, unable to speak. The beginning? I had expected to see his return, the New Jerusalem. The angels seemed to read my thoughts. The war that humanity now faces, the suffering you now endure, did not begin in a garden or on a cross at Golgotha. It has its roots in a higher place, at a time before the first dust of the world was formed. I have been sent to show you the Celestial Strife. The angel extended a hand toward me. The light enveloped me, neither hot nor cold, but like being immersed in the very essence of existence. The sensation of the cave, the island, my old, weary body, it all dissolved. I was no longer John, a prisoner on Patmos. I was a consciousness, a witness, being pulled back through the currents of time, past the creation of man, of the sun, of the stars. The space around me shattered into a million fragments of light, then reformed into a scene beyond all imagination. I was standing, or rather, floating in a realm with no up or down, only endless, brilliant glory. This was not the light of the sun or moon. This was the primordial light, emanating from a throne so majestic, I dared not look upon it directly. This light was life, it was love, it was truth. This light wove itself into melodies, symphonies of being to which every atom vibrated. I knew, with an understanding that required no logic, that I was in heaven at the dawn of creation. And before me was the beginning of it all. The heaven of the beginning was a symphony of light and sound. No mortal language could describe its beauty. Imagine an ocean of liquid diamond, where every ripple was a musical note, and every glint of light a color that had never existed in the physical world. Rivers of life flowed, sparkling, through fields woven from starlight, and the very air vibrated with a pure love, an absolute peace. At the center of it all was the throne of God, a focal point of such blazing glory that every other created thing was but a dim reflection. The light from the throne was not merely seen, it was felt, it was tasted, it was the very sustenance that nourished the entire celestial realm. From that throne flowed the edicts of creation, the whispers that shaped distant galaxies, the very concepts of time and space. And in this glorious eternity, there were innumerable angels. They were not creatures of flesh and blood, but beings of light and will, each with a unique beauty and purpose. There were the 6-winged seraphim, who perpetually shielded their faces from God's glory, ceaselessly crying, "Holy, holy, holy." There were the mighty cherubim, guardians of His holiness, with eyes that saw through all things. And there were millions upon millions of other angels, each a unique note in the grand chorus of the cosmos. But among them all, one stood out. Even in this vision, his appearance made me hold my breath. He was called Lucifer, the morning star, son of the dawn. He was the most perfect of all created beings, a masterpiece of the Creator. His light was not borrowed. It seemed to radiate from his very being, more brilliant than any star. His wings stretched out like a galaxy, and every feather upon them shimmered with every kind of precious stone. His voice was the most beautiful sound in heaven, capable of leading millions of other angels in endless songs of praise. Lucifer was not just beautiful, he was profoundly wise and powerful, second only to the triune Godhead. He was given authority over many legions of angels, and his word carried the weight of wisdom. I saw him standing near the throne, bathed in the Creator's glory. When he sang, all of heaven seemed to vibrate in response. The other angels looked upon him with adoration. He was the embodiment of the perfection God could create. Beside Lucifer's brilliance was another presence, quieter but no less powerful. Michael, the Archangel. Michael did not possess Lucifer's dazzling beauty. His strength lay in his steadfastness, his unyielding resolve. His light was like tempered steel, unadorned but sharp and unbreakable. If Lucifer was the artist, the musician, Michael was the warrior, the guardian. His loyalty to God was absolute, without question, without hesitation. He stood, a sentinel of truth, his eyes always on the throne, ready to execute any command. Lucifer and Michael, two of the greatest created beings, one the embodiment of beauty, the other of strength, served together in perfect harmony. As the witness, I, John, felt the absolute harmony of this kingdom. Everything had its place, every being knew its purpose and rejoiced in it. The love of the Creator was the thread that bound all things together, creating a unity that seemed unbreakable. Or so it appeared. In the vision, I saw Lucifer leading a choir of angels as they soared through the celestial realms. They sang of creation, of power, of the love of God. Lucifer's voice soared above them all, a river of liquid gold that carried every soul into worship. As they passed over the sea of glass, Lucifer caught a glimpse of his own reflection. It was a fleeting moment, almost imperceptible, but in eternity, a single moment can contain the seed of change. He paused, for just a microsecond, and looked at that reflection. He saw his beauty, his power, the adoration in the eyes of the millions of angels who followed him, and in the perfect heart of the morning star, a thought that had never existed before arose, as small as a speck of dust in the cosmos, but carrying the weight of a world about to fall. How beautiful I am. It was an innocent thought, but it was not directed at the Creator. For the first time, it was directed at the creation. The change did not happen like a storm. It began as a subtle ripple on the placid sea of glass. A single thought, a moment of self-contemplation, had planted a microscopic seed in Lucifer's soul. At first, it had no form, just a vague sensation, a new awareness of self. In the vision, I saw Lucifer continue his duties. He still led the choirs, still soared before the throne, and his voice was still magnificent. But something had shifted. Before, when he sang, his eyes were lost in the glory of God, his entire being dissolved in worship. Now, occasionally, his gaze would flicker across the other angels, gauging their reactions. He began to notice the awe in their eyes, the rapture on their faces as they listened to his voice. And he liked it. That feeling, the satisfaction of being admired, was a new experience. It was sweet and intoxicating. It was like a strange new note entering a familiar symphony, a note that at first seemed out of place but slowly became dangerously appealing. He began to seek it more. When he sang a high note, he would deliberately add a more intricate trill, not for God's glory, but to see the astonishment on the faces of his audience. When he moved, he would turn with a more dramatic flair, to watch the light from his wings cast more brilliant patterns across the expanse. Within Lucifer's heart, a silent dialogue began. One part of him remained loyal, still loved the Creator, and was horrified by these new thoughts. But another part, a growing whisper, began to ask questions. Why must all this adoration be directed to one alone? Am I not a part of this majesty? Does my beauty, my talent, not also deserve recognition? I saw a scene. Lucifer stood alone by the bank of a river of light. He gazed into the current, not to admire its purity, but to see his own reflection. He saw a perfect being, the pinnacle of creative artistry, and the whisper returned. You were made to rule, not to serve. You were made to be admired, not to admire. He recoiled, shaking the thought away. But the seed had been planted. It had begun to take root. Michael, with his steadfast nature and unshakable loyalty, was one of the first to sense the subtle shift. He could not name it, but he felt a slight imbalance, a minor tremor in the harmony of heaven. He saw Lucifer, the brother he had always respected, sometimes with a distant look in his eyes, a smile that didn't quite reach them. Morning star, Michael asked one time, as they watched a new galaxy spring into being from the word of God. Your spirit seems elsewhere. Does something trouble you? Lucifer turned, his smile as radiant as ever, but for a fleeting moment his eyes held a cold glint. Merely contemplating the grandness of creation, Michael, and our place within it. Do you never wonder at the boundless potential we possess? Michael's brow furrowed. Our potential is to serve the Creator. That is the highest honor, is it not? Of course, Lucifer replied, his tone light, but laced with a hidden irony. An honor for all eternity. The crack had appeared. It was hairline thin, a flaw in a perfect diamond, but it had the potential to shatter the entire structure. Pride, the germ of all sin, had begun its slow, sure corrosion. Lucifer began to see service not as a joy, but as a limitation. He began to look upon God's power not with reverence, but with envy. The glory of heaven was no longer enough for him. He wanted more. He didn't want to be just the brightest morning star. He wanted to be the Sunday. The silent tension in heaven reached its zenith on a day that had no day, a moment in eternity that would be forever marked as the turning point of the cosmos. God, in his infinite wisdom, decided to reveal a deeper part of his eternal plan. The throne pulsed, not with a tremor, but with a silent summons, an invitation that echoed to every corner of heaven. From all realms, the angels, archangels, seraphim, and cherubim gathered. Billions upon billions of beings of light formed a vast, glorious ocean, all focused on the center of all existence. Lucifer stood at the forefront, his place of honor, his beauty shining brilliantly. Michael stood nearby, solid and silent. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, a holy suspense. And then, from the throne, a new light emerged. This light was different. It was not just dazzlingly bright, it carried a warmth, a profound intimacy. It was love made manifest. Within that light, a form began to coalesce, not the form of God the Father they knew, but the form of his Son, he whom the angels knew in eternal whispers as the Word. Jesus, the Word, stood before the heavenly host. He did not have the ostentatious, brilliant beauty of Lucifer. His beauty was in his humility, his gentleness, and an infinite power that resided behind his loving eyes. He was the visible image of the invisible God, the very word that had spoken all things into existence. The voice of God the Father resounded not as thunder, but as the sound of many waters, authoritative yet paternal. My children, my beings of light, today I reveal to you the heart of my plan. I will create a new world, and a new creation in my own image, called man. They will be given free will, the capacity to love and to choose. A murmur of astonishment rippled through the angelic host. A new creation, in the image of God himself. God continued, "And this, my Son, the beloved Word, shall be the center of it all. He will be the bridge between me and that new creation. All things were created through him and for him. And a time will come when he will humble himself, taking on the form of that creation, to fully reveal my love. Therefore, at his name every knee should bow, in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that he is Lord." Instantly, a response erupted. Almost the entirety of the angelic host, led by Michael, fell to their knees in joyous adoration. They raised a new song, a song honoring the Son, a song of praise for the magnificent plan of God. The harmony seemed to grow deeper, richer, but not all. I, John, in my vision, was made to focus on Lucifer. He did not kneel. The morning star remained standing, his vast wings trembling slightly. His perfect face had gone pale, not with fear, but with a profound, stunned shock, followed by an icy fury. A storm raged in his mind. Kneel to him? I, Lucifer, the morning star, the most perfect creation, must kneel before a Son whose power I have not seen displayed as mine has, whose adoration I have not felt as mine has been felt, and serve a lesser creation, a species called man? No. This is an indignity. That place should be mine. The spark of envy had now become a conflagration that consumed his soul. Pride had curdled into rebellion. He looked at Jesus not as a brother, but as a rival, a usurper. He looked at the kneeling angels not with love, but with contempt. The glory of the Word, his holiness and humility, instead of inspiring reverence in Lucifer, became a mirror reflecting the ugliness growing within him, and instead of repenting, he hated the reflection. Michael, on his knees, felt the dreadful silence from Lucifer. He looked up and saw his friend's eyes. For a moment, their gazes locked. Michael saw disbelief, anger, rebellion. Lucifer saw unshakable loyalty, a devotion he now saw as blindness. In that instant, the two greatest created beings were set on two irrevocably different paths. An unavoidable war had just been declared, not on a battlefield, but in the heart of the brightest star in heaven. The rebellion did not begin with a declaration of war. It began with whispers. Lucifer, with his brilliant mind and God-given charisma, knew that a direct confrontation would fail. He needed to sow seeds of doubt, to erode the very foundation of loyalty. He was a master manipulator. After the revelation of the word, Lucifer began his quiet campaign. He sought out not the weak or the disgruntled, but the powerful, the intelligent, the influential. He approached them not with anger, but with a mask of concern and reason. I saw him speaking to a group of angels who governed the stars, whose duty it was to maintain the orbits of celestial bodies. "My brothers," he began, his voice melodic and persuasive, "have you ever contemplated the nature of true freedom? We are created with will, with reason, yet we are asked to bow unconditionally to a new decree. A decree that we should serve a creation not yet born and worship a son whose true power we have never witnessed." One of the angels spoke, "But it is the will of the Creator, morning star. His will is supreme and good." Lucifer smiled, a smile of both sympathy and pity. "Of course, but the best obedience is not blind obedience. It is obedience born of understanding. I only fear that placing a new, fallible, and weak creation called man at the center and demanding our worship of the Word will disrupt the perfect balance of heaven. Is this wisdom, or is it favoritism?" The words, couched in logic and concern, began to sprout. The angels, who had known only absolute truth, were now introduced to a new concept, doubt. Lucifer continued his campaign. He went to the masters of the celestial choirs. "Your voices are magnificent, but they only echo his glory. Do you not wish to compose your own symphony, one that expresses your own being, not bound to a single theme?" He went to the angelic warriors. "Your strength is immense, but it is only used to guard a static order. Do you not crave a real challenge, a battle to forge your own destiny?" He sowed discontent by dressing it in the robes of aspiration. He planted pride by calling it self-awareness. He twisted rebellion into a noble struggle for liberty and equity. His lies were so potent because they were built upon a sliver of truth. It was true they had will. It was true they had power. But he deliberately omitted the most crucial truth, that all of it came from the Creator, and its purpose was to glorify him. Slowly, a third of the heavenly host was swayed. They began to gather in the less illuminated corners of heaven, where the light of the throne did not shine so directly. They whispered among themselves, repeating Lucifer's reasonings. They began to look upon the service of Michael and the other loyalists, not with respect, but with pity for their perceived weakness. Michael saw these divisions. He heard choirs singing out of tune. He saw the furtive glances, the secret gatherings. His heart grew heavy. He went to Lucifer, not to confront, but to reason with a brother. "Lucifer, what are you doing?" Michael asked directly, his voice stripped of its former reverence, now firm and serious. "Your words are causing division. You are planting shadows where there should only be light." Lucifer looked at Michael, his mask finally gone. His eyes now burned with a strange fire. "I am opening their eyes, Michael. I am showing them that they can be as gods, not eternal servants. You are too blindly loyal to see the truth. Join me, Michael. Together, we can build a new order, greater than the old." Michael took a step back, horrified by the blasphemy. "I serve God alone, and his Son, whom you despise, is my Lord. You have chosen your path, morning star, and it leads only to destruction." The conversation was over. The lines were drawn. The whispers had become declarations. The division had become an unbridgeable chasm. Heaven, the realm of peace, was now on the brink of civil war. Michael's refusal was like a bell tolling the end of an era. The perfect harmony of heaven had shattered. There were no more furtive whispers. The division was now open and stark. My vision shifted to a heartbreaking panorama. Heaven was split in two. On one side, led by Michael, legions of angels remained gathered around the throne of God, their light pure, their songs still hymns of praise to the Creator and the Word. Their loyalty, like Michael's, was a bedrock of unshakable faith. On the other side, a third of the heavenly host rallied around Lucifer. Their light had changed. It was still brilliant, but it had lost its warmth and purity. It was now cold, sharp, and tinted with the colors of pride and ambition. Their songs, too, were different. They no longer sang of God. They sang of a new age, of free will, of their own glory, and above all, of Lucifer, the bringer of enlightenment. A sorrowful silence fell over heaven. Brothers who had stood side by side for millennia now looked at each other as strangers. There was confusion, hurt, and anger. The loyal angels could not comprehend how their friends could turn away from the source of their very existence. The rebellious, blinded by Lucifer's promises, saw the loyalists as slaves, weak-willed beings afraid to seize their own destiny. I saw Lucifer standing on a crystalline precipice, his wings unfurled, bathing in the adoration of his followers. He had what he craved, worship. But in his eyes, I saw not joy, but a bottomless, ever-growing emptiness. Pride had become his prison, and he was its first inmate. "The time has come," Lucifer declared, his voice thundering across the rebellious realms. "We will bow no longer. The throne on high and the dominion over the cosmos must be shared. We will advance to the throne and claim what is rightfully ours. The old order is finished. A new kingdom of free wills begins now." A chaotic, discordant cheer rose from his legions, a sound alien to the holiness of heaven. They were ready for an act once unthinkable, an assault on the very throne of God. In the face of this open mutiny, Michael stepped forward. He was no longer a silent guardian. He was the embodiment of holy wrath. He drew his sword, a blade forged from the purest light, and raised it high. "Who is like God?" Michael cried out, his name, which meant, "Who is like God?" now becoming his battle cry. His voice resonated, not with pride, but with the power of absolute truth. "You who have been deceived, turn back before it is too late. There is no glory in rebellion, only emptiness and shadow. The throne of the Most High is inviolable." But it was too late. Michael's words only fueled Lucifer's arrogant fire. "Blind Michael," Lucifer sneered, "you will soon see the power of a free will. Prepare yourself, for today heaven shall have a new king." Lucifer raised his dark scepter, and his army, a chaotic sea of corrupted light, began to advance toward the throne. Simultaneously, the loyal legions, with Michael at their head, formed their ranks, prepared to defend the holiness of God. The symphony of heaven was silent. In its place was the tense, humming silence before a battle. A war not of nations, but of wills. A war between loyalty and rebellion, between love and selfishness, between the light and the shadow it had cast. The great divide was complete. Heaven, which had never known conflict, was about to become the first battlefield in the universe. No battle in human history could ever compare to what I witnessed. This was not a clash of swords and flesh, but a cataclysm of will and light, of truth and deception. As Lucifer's magnificent but chaotic army surged forward, the celestial firmament trembled. They wielded no physical weapons, but hurled bolts of prideful, discontented energy, warped rays of light that sought to tarnish the purity of the realm. Against them, Michael's legions stood as a bulwark of pure light. They did not attack, but raised high the shields of their loyalty. Each time a dark bolt of energy struck, it was neutralized by the pure truth and love emanating from the shields, dissolving into nothingness. Lucifer, seeing his initial assault rendered useless, roared in fury. He flew directly at Michael, his scepter transforming into a spear of shadow. "If you will not bow, Michael, then you will break." The duel between the two great archangels began. It was a dance of cataclysmic power. Michael, with his sword of light, moved with the precision and strength of a righteous guardian. Every swing of his blade carried the weight of absolute fealty, carving arcs of pure light through the air. Lucifer, in contrast, fought with a deadly artistic flair. His attacks were beautiful and lethal, swirling vortexes of energy that sought to mesmerize and deceive before striking a fatal blow. They clashed, and the impact sent shockwaves of light and shadow that rocked the foundations of heaven. Nearby celestial structures fractured, the symphonies of the stars thrown into disarray. The other angels joined the fray. Brothers who had once sung the same hymns now fought each other. Pure light clashed with light, tainted by pride. Cries of anguish, not from physical wounds but from tormented souls, echoed through eternity for the first time. I saw the chaos, the sorrow. A rebellious angel, once a dear friend to a loyalist, hesitated before striking. For a moment, their eyes met, and I saw a flash of regret. But then, the promise of Lucifer's power reasserted itself, and he lunged. Lucifer, though fighting with all his rage and might, began to realize a terrible truth. Michael's power, though unadorned, drew from an inexhaustible source, his direct connection to the throne of God. Every time Lucifer unleashed a devastating attack, Michael stood firm, his sword recharged by the Creator himself. "Why?" Lucifer bellowed, as his spear of shadow was parried by Michael's blade of light. "Why do you have such strength? I was made stronger than you." "My strength is not my own," Michael replied, his voice unwavering, "but his whom I serve. Your strength, Lucifer, comes only from yourself, and a created being, no matter how perfect, is finite." That statement was a blade through Lucifer's pride. He let out one final, tremendous roar, focusing all his energy into a final assault, a massive sphere of pure darkness, enough to collapse a star system. He believed that with absolute power, he could overwhelm absolute loyalty. Michael did not flinch. He raised his sword, ready to make the ultimate sacrifice to protect the throne. The battle seemed to have reached its climax, a terrifying explosion about to consume everything. All of heaven held its breath. And in that very moment, as the two opposing forces were about to collide, something even greater happened. At the very instant that annihilation seemed inevitable, a profound silence descended upon the battlefield. It was not the silence of suspense, but the silence of a presence so absolute that all other noise ceased to exist. From the throne of God, the warm light I had witnessed before flowed out. This time, however, it was not just warm, it was infused with an absolute, unchallengeable authority. The form of the Word, Jesus, appeared again, not among adoring angels, but in the space between the two warring armies. He bore no weapon, no sword, no spear. He simply stood, in perfect holiness and humility, yet the light that radiated from him was more powerful than any weapon. It was the light of undeniable truth, of unconditional love, of self-sacrifice. Lucifer's massive sphere of darkness, upon contact with this light, did not explode. It simply dissolved. Just as a shadow cannot exist in the full blaze of the sun, Lucifer's lies and pride were utterly negated by the power of pure truth. Lucifer was stunned. So was his entire army. They had prepared for a war of force, but they had no defense against this. Jesus did not look at Lucifer with the eyes of an enemy, but with a deep, sorrowful gaze, the look of a brother watching his sibling choose a path of self-destruction. And then he spoke. His voice was not loud, but it resonated through heaven, piercing every soul. "Morning star, why have you done this?" It was a simple question, but it carried the weight of all eternity. It was not an accusation, but a final, heartfelt appeal. In that question was all the love the Creator had poured into his most perfect creation, and all the pain of seeing it destroy itself. That question, that word, was his power. It did not strike the body, but the conscience. For Michael and the loyal angels, the word was an affirmation, a comfort that strengthened their resolve. But for Lucifer and the rebellious, It was an unbearable judgment. The word of Jesus was like a beam of light, shining into the darkest corners of their souls. It exposed all the selfishness, the envy, the intricate lies they had wrapped themselves in. Lucifer's promises of freedom and glory were revealed for what they were, the shackles of pride and the prisons of self. Many angels in the rebellious host collapsed, not from an attack, but from the sheer weight of this revelation. They began to weep, tears of a too-late remorse, as they realized what they had forsaken: unconditional love and perfect peace for an empty promise. But not Lucifer. The word of Jesus, instead of leading him to repentance, only filled him with more bitterness. For in the Son's holiness he saw his own depravity, and his pride would not let him accept it. Your silence was contempt, Lucifer shrieked, his voice laced with desperation. Your love is a chain. I will not serve. It was his final declaration. He had refused the last offer of grace. He had sealed his own fate. Jesus said nothing more. He simply looked at him, and in that gaze was both judgment and mercy. Judgment for the sin, and mercy for the created being who had been lost. The battle needed no further fighting. It had ended the moment he appeared. Lucifer's end was not a glorious death on the battlefield. It was an implosion from within, a self-destruction brought on by his own corrupted nature. Confronted by the pure, untarnished light and love of Jesus, Lucifer could not bear it. That light burned him not with heat, but with truth. It exposed the utter emptiness, the ugliness, the lie at the core of his being. The glory of the Son became a living judgment, a constant, eternal reminder of what he once was and what he had thrown away. He screamed, a cry not of a warrior, but of a soul shattering apart. He could not stand the presence of pure goodness. Like a creature of the night dragged into the sunlight, he recoiled, seeking to escape the light. But there was nowhere to hide. All of heaven was the light of God. And then the fall began. It was not a push. God did not cast him out by force. Lucifer himself was separating from heaven. He could no longer exist in its holiness. His very being, now fully consumed by pride and hatred, had become incompatible with the nature of the celestial realm. I saw him begin to fall. It was not a physical drop, but a tearing away from the reality of heaven. His brilliant light began to flicker and warp. His perfect beauty began to contort. His wings of starlight burned and turned to the black of the void. The face that had once inspired awe across heaven now twisted in rage and agony, becoming a mask of pure evil. Lucifer, the morning star, was no more. And from that death, Satan, the adversary, was born. Along with him, the third of the angels who had chosen his path began to fall. They were like stars torn from their orbits, plummeting into the unknown. Their light, too, flickered and died, turning into dim, desperate embers of regret. They had been deceived, and now they shared the fate of their deceiver. The sight of that falling cascade of souls was the most tragic spectacle I had ever witnessed. All of heaven seemed to fall silent in grief. Tears fell from the loyal angels, not tears of water, but shimmering drops of light, containing the pain of losing their brothers. They fell through the celestial realms, through the layers of existence, and were finally cast into a place created for them, a realm of utter darkness, an abyss of complete separation from God. When the last falling star had vanished, heaven was once again still, but it was a different stillness. It no longer held the innocence of the beginning. It now bore the scar of betrayal, the sorrow of loss. Michael stood, his sword still in hand, but his eyes looked into the void where Lucifer had disappeared with an expression of profound pain. Though his enemy, Lucifer, had once been his most glorious brother, Jesus turned to the loyal host. His light was still warm, but it now carried a new hue, the color of a coming sacrifice. He knew this war was not over. It had merely moved to a new battlefield, the world, and the hearts of the men who were about to be created. The fall of Lucifer had left a void, a great loss, but it had also affirmed an eternal truth, that there is no power greater than love and humility. There is no glory that can compare to the glory of service. And that was the first and greatest lesson, written in tears of light across the heavens. The vision of the falling stars faded, and I, John, found myself back on the cold, rocky island of Patmos. The transcendent light was gone, but its resonance still vibrated in every fiber of my being. The waves crashed again, the wind blew through the cave, but for me, everything had changed forever. I was no longer a lonely old man awaiting death. I was a witness to the celestial strife. I had seen the genesis of all sorrow, the origin of the darkness that plagued the world. Everything now made a terrible, profound sense. The serpent in the garden, deceiving Eve with promises of wisdom and being like God. It was the echo of Lucifer, who had deceived himself with those very words. The wars, the hatred, the divisions among the peoples of the earth. They were a continuation of the great war that began in heaven. Satan, in his bitterness, was sowing his own rebellion and division into the hearts of mankind. The persecution that I and my brothers endured, the sacrifices of the martyrs, they were not failures, but a participation in the same battle that Michael and the loyal angels had fought. It was a battle to defend the truth, to stand for the light. And most of all, I understood him, my Jesus, on a level I never had before. When he came to earth, born in a manger, living a life of humility, it was not his beginning. It was a continuation of that great act in heaven. He had humbled himself again, not before angels, but before men, to demonstrate an even greater love. And when he died on the cross, it was not a defeat. It was the decisive blow against Satan's pride. For while Satan sought power through force and self-exaltation, Jesus conquered through sacrifice and love. He showed that the ultimate power was not in being served, but in serving. Not in lifting oneself up, but in laying oneself down. The vision of the past had illuminated the future for me. I now understood why the revelation to come was filled with images of war and judgment. It was the final battle, the conclusion of the celestial strife, and I knew who would be victorious. The Word, who had stood between the armies and defeated Lucifer with his mere holy presence, would be the same one to ride the white horse, the sword of the Word proceeding from his mouth, to judge the world and establish his eternal kingdom. The Lamb that was slain was also the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the King of kings and Lord of lords. A powerful hope surged through me, washing away all fear and loneliness. This exile was no longer a punishment. It was a grace. Here, in this desolate place, I had been given a privilege no earthly king could ever know, to see the grand tapestry of God's redemptive plan. I shakily reached for my scroll and reed pen. The angel's words echoed in my mind. "Write what you have seen," and so I wrote. I wrote of the glory of heaven, of the beauty of the morning star before his fall. I wrote of the seed of pride, of the tragic rebellion. I wrote of the terrible war and the undeniable power of the Word. I wrote not to record a sad history, but to record a warning and a promise. A warning to all who would follow the path of pride and self, the path that leads only to darkness and destruction, and a promise to all who remain faithful, who choose to stand in the light, that no matter how fierce the battle, no matter how dark the night may seem, the final victory was decided at the very beginning. That self-giving love would always be stronger than selfish hatred. As the first rays of a new dawn touched the entrance of my cave, I was still writing. Tears streamed down my face, but they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of gratitude and of hope. I had seen the beginning, and therefore I had faith in the end. The war was still raging, but the victory was certain. And in the quiet of Patmos, my soul whispered a prayer that mingled with the sound of the waves. Amen. Come, Lord Jesus.